My entitled sisters thought they could steal my vacation home and turn it into their own profit-making scheme. But when their husbands broke in, it backfired and landed them in court facing serious charges. I'm Mark, 30M, and this whole mess started with a small cedar cabin by the lake. It wasn't glamorous, but it was mine. Left to me by my Aunt Caroline after she passed away. She had no kids of her own, and to everyone's surprise, she willed the property to me. I wasn't the golden child of my family. That title belonged to my older sister Jenna, 31, who was polished, calculating, and always thought she was the smartest person in the room. My younger sister Mia, 26, had always been the fun one. Charming when she wanted to be, manipulative when she didn't get her way. I was just the middle child who worked hard, kept my head down, and never got much recognition. But Aunt Caroline saw me differently. When Mom forgot to visit, I'd be the one mowing Aunt's lawn, fixing her leaky pipes, or bringing groceries when she was sick. She noticed even when no one else did. That's why she left me the cabin, along with a handwritten note tucked into the deed. For the one who showed up. My sisters smiled through clenched teeth at the funeral, but I could tell they were furious. For months, they ignored me, only to resurface when I started fixing up the cabin. I had posted some before and after photos online. New paint, fixed flooring, a dock that I straightened with my own hands. The comments poured in about how peaceful it looked. To me, it was a sanctuary. To Jenna and Mia, it was dollar signs. The first sign of trouble came over brunch. They invited me out, pretending it was just to catch up. Halfway through the meal, they launched into a pitch. Jenna explained that my cabin had huge potential as a rental property. Mia chimed in about how her husband could help with repairs, and Jenna's husband could manage the finances. Their plan was to list it on short-term rental sites, split the money between themselves, and give me a small stipend since I wasn't using it enough. I nearly choked on my coffee. They expected me to hand over the property that Aunt Caroline trusted me with so they could pocket the profits. I said no, politely at first, then firmly. Their smiles cracked. Jenna accused me of being selfish and short-sighted. Mia pouted and said I was robbing the family of opportunity. When I didn't budge, brunch ended with icy silence, and I got stuck with the bill. I thought that was the end of it. I was wrong. Saying no to entitled people isn't an answer, it's a challenge. And my sisters had no intention of walking away quietly. Within weeks, Mom was calling me about sharing blessings. Dad, who avoided conflict his whole life, texted me a shrug emoji. Jenna began posting online about gatekeeping family assets, while Mia uploaded photos at the dock like it was hers. Then, one day, I opened my mailbox to find a glossy brochure. On the cover, Lakeside Haven, book now. Inside were photos of my cabin, my dock, my kitchen, even Aunt Caroline's old teapot on the stove. I hadn't made this brochure, but someone else had. And worse, they were already taking reservations. The brochure listed my cabin under a shiny new company called Two Sisters Retreats LLC. The email contact, Jenna's married name. The phone number, Mia's husband's. My blood went cold. They weren't just talking about sharing anymore. They had built a whole rental business around my cabin, and they didn't even bother hiding their fingerprints. I called Jenna immediately. She answered as if nothing was wrong. Her voice sugar-sweet. "Oh, Alex. Glad you saw it. Isn't it exciting? We've already had a few inquiries." I told her point blank, "You don't own the cabin. You can't rent it." She gave a little laugh like I was the one being ridiculous. "Technically, you own it," she said. "But family property is family property. We're just putting it to use. You'll still benefit." "No," I said firmly. "Shut it down." Her tone changed instantly. "You're being emotional. It's just commerce." Then she hung up. I drove out to the cabin that weekend, stomach in knots. The second I walked in, my heart dropped. There were welcome baskets stacked by the mudroom, full of granola bars and maps. A lockbox had been bolted to the railing outside, the kind you'd use for guest keys. On the counter was a copy of a management agreement, complete with my forged signature. I snapped photos of everything. The signature didn't even look like mine. Later, I found out Mia had taken it to a notary friend who was willing to stamp it without me ever being there. That night, I ripped out the lockbox, changed the locks again, and installed a new keypad entry system. I also added cameras around the cabin. One at the front door, one by the dock, and one hidden in the boathouse. My gut told me this wasn't over. On Monday, I met with a lawyer. She didn't laugh at the family drama. She pulled up statutes and laid it out clearly. Forgery, unlawful advertising, trespass if they set foot inside. Keep your cool, she advised. Document everything, and don't confront them alone. So I had her draft a cease and desist letter citing every law they were breaking. It was airtight. Jenna replied with a 3-paragraph rant about family equity and generational wealth. Mia sent me a crying voice memo about dreams being crushed. Their husbands sent emojis, keys, money bags, flexing arms. The rental listing went temporarily unavailable, but Jenna kept posting teasers online. Mia uploaded selfies at the cabin, claiming she was renovating. I knew it was only a matter of time, and I was right. 3 nights later, at 1:17 a.m., my phone buzzed with a motion alert from the boathouse camera. 2 hooded figures were creeping up the back trail toward my cabin. The camera feed lit up my phone in eerie black and white. 2 men in hoodies, skulking through the trees like amateurs who thought they were invisible. Even through the grainy night vision, I recognized them instantly. Rick, Jenna's husband. Tyler, Mia's. My heart was pounding, but I stayed calm. I dialed 911, put the dispatcher on speaker, and whispered as the porch cam caught them fumbling with the new keypad I had installed. Tyler crouched low, trying codes at random. Rick circled the cabin, tugging on windows that I had reinforced with extra locks. "Do you know these individuals?" the dispatcher asked. "Unfortunately, yes," I said. "They're my brothers-in-law." It was surreal watching my own family attempt to break in like petty criminals. But the kicker? Down at the shoreline, another motion alert popped up. Mia was there, holding her phone flashlight, filming what looked like content. And in the driveway, Jenna's SUV sat idling with the hazard lights blinking, like she was the getaway driver. Then it happened. Tyler pried the side door open with a crowbar, tripping the alarm I'd secretly wired into the system. A piercing siren exploded into the night, and the 2 of them froze. They tried to scramble inside, knocking over the baskets of granola bars and tourist maps they had staged for fake guests. The dispatcher confirmed police were en route. I stayed on the line, watching as Rick and Tyler blundered out onto the porch. My cameras recorded everything. Their faces, their tools, their panic. Minutes later, red and blue lights flooded the trees. Sheriff's deputies swarmed the property, weapons drawn. Rick raised his hands immediately, but Tyler argued, insisting that family can't trespass family. The deputy shut that down quick. "Title says otherwise, sir." Jenna tried to wave a crumpled contract at the officers, claiming they had permission. The deputy scanned it, noted the forged signature, and tucked it into an evidence bag. Mia sobbed about being pressured and just trying to help. None of it mattered. By the time dawn broke, Rick and Tyler were booked for attempted burglary, criminal trespass, and possession of burglary tools. The forged contract got its own case file. Jenna and Mia were listed as accomplices. When my mom called at sunrise, she didn't ask if I was okay. She demanded, "How could you do this to your sisters?" I simply emailed her the footage. Her only reply was, "Jesus sees everything." Maybe he did, but so did the cameras. Court begins on paper before it ever reaches a gavel. Arraignment notices, charge sheets, protective orders. Rick looked deflated in a suit that had fit better years ago. Tyler sat stiff, like he couldn't believe he was in a courtroom instead of his garage. Their lawyer tried to spin it as a family misunderstanding. The prosecutor countered with 3 words, "We have video." Jenna and Mia sat behind them, stone-faced but restless. Jenna whispered furiously to her attorney, insisting she had authority to manage the cabin as a family asset. Mia cried quiet tears for the gallery to see. But the charges stuck: criminal trespass, attempted burglary, conspiracy, and, for the notary who had illegally stamped the agreement, unlawful notarization. Meanwhile, my phone buzzed with texts from relatives who hadn't spoken to me in years. Suddenly, I was the villain. Family doesn't take family to court. How could you ruin your sisters' lives over a house? The irony burned. I hadn't taken anyone to court. They had taken themselves there the night they broke in with a crowbar. I stayed silent publicly, but privately, I built a wall of evidence. Every photo of the baskets, every time-stamped camera recording, the glossy brochures, even screenshots of Jenna's posts bragging about building generational wealth. My lawyer smiled grimly as she stacked the folder. "You've got them 6 ways from Sunday," she said. The prosecutor hinted at plea deals: probation, restitution, and a permanent no-contact order. Tyler looked ready to fold. Rick muttered about bad advice. But Jenna? She bristled like a cat in a storm. She ranted about patriarchy and hoarding assets, while ignoring the fact she had forged my signature. In the middle of all this, my grandmother came to sit beside me at a pretrial hearing. She had been quiet since Aunt Caroline's funeral, but that day she cleared her throat and spoke directly to the judge. "The only thing Alex ever took," she said firmly, "was responsibility." The courtroom went silent. Even the court recorder lifted her eyes. For the first time, Jenna lost her practiced composure. It was clear the mask was slipping. The sisters who thought they could gaslight the world were realizing they had overplayed their hand. And the deeper investigators dug, the more evidence of forgery and fraud they unearthed. Detectives followed the paper trail, and like most bad lies, it didn't take long to crack. The notary Jenna and Mia had roped in was a salon acquaintance. Under questioning, she folded immediately. She admitted Mia had slid a half-completed document across her nail table with a gift card tucked underneath. "It's just family paperwork," Mia had whispered. The notary confessed she never logged it properly, terrified now that she had committed a felony for a $50 favor. The management agreement itself was laughable. My supposed signature was a wobbly imitation, and the date line didn't even match the property records. Worse for them, the file metadata showed it had been created on Jenna's work laptop, then emailed from Mia's phone. The arrogance was astounding. They hadn't even tried to cover their tracks. Rick panicked first. He told investigators that he thought the cabin was already under his wife's control. He admitted Jenna had reassured them everything was authorized. He even produced texts from Mia saying, "Go now, it's all set." That single message unraveled their narrative of confusion. It was proof of intent. The DA piled on charges: attempted burglary, conspiracy, forgery, and criminal trespass. Their lawyer tried to argue family property disputes don't belong in criminal court. The prosecutor just tapped the stack of exhibits: the fake contract, the notary confession, the video footage. "This isn't a dispute," she said. "It's a crime." Meanwhile, Mom doubled down. She called me in tears, insisting I should withdraw the complaints for the sake of family harmony. I told her I hadn't pressed charges. Law enforcement had. Her voice went cold. "You could fix this if you wanted to." Dad texted me 2 words: "Don't escalate." But it was already escalated. I coped the only way I knew: by fixing things. I replaced a dock cleat with a heavier one. I sanded a stair tread that didn't need sanding. Busy hands, quiet mind. Still, the weight of betrayal sat on my shoulders like wet concrete. Then came the bombshell. A local realtor reached out with an email that chilled me. Weeks before the break-in, she had received a listing authorization from 2 sisters' retreats, asking her to represent my cabin as a pocket listing. She hadn't moved forward because something felt off. She forwarded the document, complete with forged signature blocks using my aunt's maiden name. This wasn't about renting. They were gearing up to sell my property right out from under me. Theft wasn't the plan. It was the end game. Every family has a myth, and in ours, Jenna was always the golden child. She was polished, articulate, the one who could spin anything into a story that made her look like the hero. For years, Mom and Dad treated her word like scripture. If Jenna said it, it must be true. But even golden children can rust. At the pretrial conference, the prosecutor offered a plea, probation, restitution, community service, and a permanent no-contact order. Take the deal, avoid trial, and keep felony charges off the record. Rick's lawyer leaned toward acceptance immediately. Tyler, sweating bullets, nodded quietly. But Jenna? She bristled like a cornered cat. She launched into a rant about wealth gaps and familial hoarding, insisting that she was only trying to unlock latent assets. She spat words like she was in a boardroom, not a courtroom. It was almost impressive, if it weren't so detached from reality. Mia started crying again, mumbling about dreams and pressure. She played the victim, as if tears could erase the forged contracts, the break-in, and the fake brochures. That's when Grandma stood up. She hadn't said a word until then. She looked at the judge, then at Jenna and Mia, and finally at me. Her voice cut through the courtroom like a church bell. The only thing Alex ever took was responsibility. He showed up when no one else did. And Caroline left him that cabin because she knew he'd protect it. Don't you dare twist that into greed. The silence was deafening. Even the court stenographer paused. Jenna's shoulders slumped. For the first time, she didn't have a rehearsed line. Mia buried her face in her hands. Rick muttered something to his lawyer about just taking the deal. The mask had cracked. The golden child wasn't untouchable anymore. Not in the eyes of the court, and not in the eyes of the family watching from the gallery. The plea bargain suddenly seemed like a lifeline instead of an insult. But the damage was already done. The truth was no longer just evidence in a file. It had been spoken out loud, in front of everyone, and it couldn't be unsaid. Up to that point, everything had lived inside courtrooms and whispered family gossip. But scandals don't stay private anymore. All it took was one local blog picking up the arrest reports, and suddenly my sister's vacation rental empire was headline fodder. The article was short, but brutal. 2 local women and their spouses faced charges of forgery, trespass, and attempted burglary after allegedly trying to seize control of a relative's lake cabin. It even included the glossy brochure from 2 sisters' retreats that police had collected as evidence. The comments section lit up. Neighbors weighed in. Strangers mocked. One person stitched Jenna's old Instagram posts about building generational wealth with her mugshot. Another dug up Mia's teary TikTok apologies and compared them to footage of her filming outside my boathouse the night of the break-in. They had always been obsessed with appearances. Now appearances were tearing them apart. Jenna tried to go on the offensive. She posted a long manifesto online about how I was gatekeeping family assets and destroying opportunities for generational growth. She sprinkled in hashtags about empowerment, equity, and entrepreneurship, but the screenshots of forged contracts and police reports drowned out her words. Mia leaned into performative vulnerability. She uploaded a carousel of black and white selfies, captions about healing, and hashtags like #mentalhealthjourney. But side by side with the break-in footage that was circulating, it rang hollow. Meanwhile, I stayed quiet. My lawyer warned me, don't post, don't comment, let the evidence speak. So I worked. I replaced locks again. I cleaned up the mudroom where Rick and Tyler had tripped over their own welcome baskets. I fixed the pry marks in the side door. And at night, I sat on the dock listening to the lake water slap against the shore, reminding myself that silence is sometimes stronger than any argument. The DA reached out, asking if I wanted to add restitution for the damages, the broken door frame, the holes drilled for the lockbox, the legal fees. I said yes, not for the money, but because it mattered to have the record reflect what they had taken. On paper, restitution is arithmetic. In life, it's acknowledgement. And acknowledgement was the one thing my sisters had never given me. The day finally came when words gave way to signatures. Rick and Tyler, once puffed-up tough guys, looked small at the defense table. Their lawyer negotiated a deal. Misdemeanor convictions, probation, restitution, and mandatory community service. Instead of building wealth, they'd spend weekends picking up trash by highways. The forged notary admitted guilt too. She received a suspended sentence and mandatory retraining. Her career as a favor friend was over. But the spotlight never left Jenna and Mia. They had fought the hardest, denied the loudest, and dragged the family name through the mud with their arrogance. In the end, even they couldn't outrun the evidence. They agreed to civil consent orders. No use of my images or address in any business or rental listing. No claiming to manage or represent the cabin in any form. No stepping foot on the property or directing anyone else to. Each violation carried fines that doubled with every incident. The judge looked directly at Jenna when she signed and said, "You understand this is permanent?" Her voice was tight when she answered yes. Outside the courtroom, she turned on me one last time. "You humiliated us," she hissed. I didn't answer, not because I didn't have words, but because humiliation wasn't my doing. Consequences were. Grandma squeezed my arm, proud but tired. We drove home together, stopping for pie at the same diner Aunt Caroline used to love. Over dessert, she said softly, "Your aunt knew you'd be tested. She left you more than a house. She left you a fight worth winning." That night at the cabin, the air was still. I brewed tea in Aunt's blue pot, the one Jenna had once staged for fake rental photos, and sat on the porch watching the stars burn steady above the water. For the first time in months, I didn't feel like I was guarding a fortress. It felt like I was home. I thought maybe, just maybe, once the legal dust settled, my family would leave me alone. But entitlement doesn't die easily, it mutates. 2 weeks after the consent orders were signed, Mom showed up unannounced at the cabin. No warning, no invitation, just the sound of her car crunching up the gravel drive. She stepped inside like she still owned the place, her eyes darting over every surface, cataloging. "We need to talk," she said. She asked me to reset the situation. To her, reset meant erasing the court cases, the forged documents, the break-in. To me, it meant forgetting that my own sisters had tried to sell the house out from under me. "We're family, Alex," she said, her tone sharp. "This cabin should be bringing us together." I let her finish, then asked her one question. "When you say us, do you mean love or leverage?" She didn't answer. I reminded her calmly of the court order. Jenna and Mia were not allowed on the property. Neither were their husbands. If she wanted to visit me, she was welcome, but the cabin was off-limits to their schemes forever. Her face hardened. "You've changed," she snapped. "No," I said. "I've stopped pretending." She left without another word. Dad texted later that night, "Don't make her choose." But she already had. She had chosen denial over and over again. After she left, I found myself pacing the kitchen. I opened a drawer and pulled out a folded letter I'd nearly forgotten about. Aunt Caroline's final note to her lawyer. It was a codicil in her will, dated months before she died. It said that if any family member tried to encumber, sell, or transfer the cabin without my written consent, her scholarship fund, the one that paid tuition for local kids, would be redirected out of our hometown. She had predicted their greed before it even surfaced. She had locked down every angle, and she had trusted me to defend it. Spring came quietly, carrying a kind of peace I hadn't felt in years. Neighbors waved more freely now when they passed the cabin. One left a note tucked under the doormat. "Glad you kept it. Caroline picked right." Restitution payments began arriving. Rick's check showed up on time every month, signed in neat accountant's handwriting, maybe his attempt at penance. Tyler's came late at first, then regular after my lawyer sent a sharp reminder that the fines would double if he slipped again. It was strange, receiving envelopes of money from men who once tried to pry open my door with a crowbar. Strange but satisfying. Jenna and Mia, meanwhile, had gone nearly silent. Their social media, once filled with boasts and manifestos, dried up. First it was vague, healing posts, then nothing at all. Silence can mean two things: strategy or surrender. I didn't care which, either was better than the noise they'd created. The cabin itself healed slowly. I replaced the last doorframe that had been cracked. I painted fresh trim, even though Aunt Caroline would have teased me for my choice of color. I kept her blue teapot in its usual spot, a reminder of who the house really belonged to before me. One evening, sitting on the dock, I pulled out the realtor's listing authorization they had once tried to use to sell my cabin. I burned it in a tin can by the shoreline. Watching the flames curl those lies into ash felt like reclaiming something bigger than property. Felt like reclaiming myself. The scholarship fund Aunt left behind sent out its annual letters. One of them found its way to my mailbox, addressed to me. Inside was a handwritten thank you from a student who had just graduated debt-free. "I'll never forget this chance," she wrote. That's when I realized Aunt's legacy wasn't just a house. It was the responsibility to guard what mattered. The cabin wasn't just mine to own, it was mine to protect. And for the first time, I believed I'd done right by her. Justice doesn't explode with fireworks. It settles in quietly, like dust after a long storm. Life at the cabin became simple again. Coffee in the mornings didn't taste like court dates anymore. Evenings on the dock were peaceful, no longer shadowed by thoughts of cameras catching trespassers. The house stopped feeling like a fortress and returned to being a home. People still ask if I've forgiven my sisters. The truth? Forgiveness is complicated. I don't wish them harm, but I also don't invite them back into my life. What they called family was really leverage, and I learned the hard way that love without respect is just control wearing a mask. Mom hasn't visited since the day she accused me of changing. Maybe I have. I've learned to hold boundaries even when they're unpopular. Dad checks in occasionally, short messages that say little but mean enough. Grandma still visits, bringing pie and reminding me that showing up is what matters most. The cabin itself feels like a ledger finally balanced. I pruned the trees, fixed the roof again, and kept Aunt Caroline's teapot where it belongs. It's not wealth. It's not leverage. It's a promise I kept, to her and to myself. The last thing I framed wasn't a photo. It was her handwritten note. For the one who showed up. It hangs by the cabin door now, a reminder every time I walk in or out. So here's the lesson. When entitled people say family, ask them if they mean love, or if they mean ownership. Then check your locks. Keep your receipts. And don't let anyone turn your sanctuary into their portfolio. Because sometimes the truest justice is simply keeping what was already yours.